We would like to just thank everybody for attending our weekly webinar. This is day number 3, and we have Bill Glynn from US Saws here today. So thank you, Bill, for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Just a quick rundown of our agenda. We'll do our introductions. Bill will give his presentation. At the end, we'll do a Q&A session. So Vasco already sent out a chat to all of the attendees. So if you have any questions whatsoever on the presentation, feel free to type them into that chat bar, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. And also at the end, we have a giveaway. So we will announce that giveaway at the end as well. So quick bio on Bill. He has 30 years in the concrete industry, work experience with SawTech, Blast Track, Diamatic, and now he is part owner of the US Saws since 2010. He is also vice chair of the Saw Manufacturers Institute for Diamond Tools and Construction Equipment under the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. So thank you, Bill. Awesome.
That's my one big title.
Very
nicely introduced. Yeah, it's cool.
Awesome.
So yeah, guys, thank you very much for having me on. It's a pretty cool opportunity just as everyone's kind of locked down. Hopefully some folks are still out working, but it's a great opportunity to actually reach out to some people and give a little description on our brand. US Saws has been around for years and years. Matter of fact, I've got, I don't want to ruin the whole presentation. I'll talk right over the whole thing, but yeah, we can jump straight in if you guys want to. I can do share my screen out, unless, do you guys want to do your personal introductions, and then we'll get rocking forward?
Yeah, sure. So Kristen, she already spoke. My name is Vasco Checkeroff with Runyon. Pretty much, you know, same like Bill. You know, I come from the industry, have some construction background, diamond tool manufacturing background, and been with Runyon for going on 4 years now. From the looks of it, I know quite a few of you guys that are attending. Thank you guys for giving us the time and the opportunity to kind of get to you in a different type of platform. Again, please feel free to interrupt, just in the chat bar, just write out your question, whatever that may be. We'll address it. If there is a lot of questions, we're not going to ignore it. We'll definitely answer your question. We're just going to save it so that way Bill can properly go through his presentation, and save it for the Q&A at the end. So again, thank you guys. And Bill, let's go. Let's take it off.
All right, cool. I'm going to share my screen here, and that should bring up, you guys got that intro page there?
Yep.
Perfect. So little intro on what we're doing here. We're going to talk kind of a broad forum on, obviously with 30 years of background as we've built our brand. Certainly a big thank you to Runyon here. They've actually been one of our great dealers for almost 10 years now, which is fantastic as this business evolved and the polishing side has really come on. You guys have done an awesome job. So thank you for that. Going back on US Saws, who are we and what are we all about? We've been manufacturing equipment 30 years, and we've always been in the construction side of business, but if you think back that far, epoxy flooring was still the primary go-to for industrial type flooring applications to prevent dusting and those kind of things, and chemicals and tooling and a lot of things have changed in that time period. So we made a lot of restoration and repair tools, and dust at that time was still a major problem in the industry. So whether it was cutting or grinding floors, I mean, shot blasting really started to innovate the true act of dust collection with their machines. Otherwise, it was open grinding or wet grinding with terrazzo style grinders back then. And so a lot of that's changed. And when we realized that the shot blaster could collect its dust, we figured out that small tools could also have those same shrouding features. And of course, dust collection vacuums, especially portable ones, didn't exist back then. So we had to kind of innovate the entire line. So it was really early on in that business. And so we introduced the first commercially available shroud sets. We did a lot of diamond development. Dry diamonds actually had just started to kind of come into the market. most everything was wet cutting it prior to that in the early 80s or late 70s. So dry diamond technology started to innovate, and we actually were on the forefront of some things. And specifically because we were dealing with flooring contractors and waterproofing contractors, we recognized the need to develop specialized blades. So one of the things that we had first done in terms of surface grinding was actually develop the first turbo style cup wheel. In the old days, they were all ring style segments, and we said, boy, these always gouge up the floor horribly. And so we turned the segment sideways, and unfortunately, so one of the most common cup wheels used now. But that was one of the innovations we came up with flooring way back when. So pretty amazing stuff. The V-blade for cutting out cracks. Parking garage restoration was huge back in the late 80s, early 90s. I think the coating technology for traffic bearing membranes and things has come a long way and kind of eliminated a lot of that regular work. But we continue to innovate based on those same principles. Specialized cutting. We don't compete with big large saw manufacturers in terms of the big Husqvarnas or the Diamond Products type tooling. We focus really on very niche interior applications, and we've really focused ourselves down mostly to the 110 volt market in terms of hand tools. Obviously, when you go to Europe and around the world, there's different power supplies, and we use power tools like Metabo in a lot of instances. And so we can actually convert up to 220 volt pretty easily, but our primary focus is low power hand tools and edging. We feel no need to go compete with the dozen or so large tool manufacturers in terms of large field grinders or shot blasters or anything like that. Those are their own special entities and they're well-developed markets. There's really no need for us to go pursue that. We stick to our guns, and we've been doing crack chasing and joint repair for, long time. So one of the things that's kind of come around and just moving on is joints. Who even cares about joints? It's someone that's not in the industry walks over an industrial floor, they walk into a Home Depot or a Lowe's or big box store, they don't even notice that those things even exist. And so why do we even care about it? And we've done things in the last 10 years specifically as customers have had more and more need to keep an aesthetic quality to the joints on a floor. Early polished floors, in a lot of cases, they were just left open joints. There's no spec for it. They didn't mess with it. They just polished out concrete and walked off the job, and the joints would collect dirt and trash. And certainly in restaurant type environments, that wasn't very good in terms of collection of food waste and things like that. In industrial applications, that's kind of where our backbone really began, is industrial floors. Honoring joints in epoxy or seamless floor systems, that was always something that we kind of got involved with. And of course, when you could go into a facility in 1989 and cut a control joint without creating a lot of dust, that was really something special. So the industrial floor for joint filling and those kind of things has always been a little bit more important just in terms of a cleanliness. And of course, the guys from Metzger-Maguire have really innovated on their end, the stabilization of joints in terms of joint fill, so wheeled traffic doesn't have that speed bump effect that open joints have. So that's been kind of one of those niches that we've grabbed onto. And of course, commercial and retail spaces. I mean, now you go into the mall, well, when you could go into the mall, and a lot of those floors in there had different types of more industrial looks to them, and sometimes they would put different contrasting color joint fills just to create a little bit of a dynamic, almost a tile type pattern or decorative pattern. So a lot of different things, but joints in themselves, the decorative polished concrete market, especially as it's exposed to the public instead of industrial, really is driven that they want a nice clean finish, a beautiful kind of a seamless appearance on those projects. So a little bit back on what we do. Surface grinding has been part of it, just the early days of dust collection. We make a lot of different hand tools, some light duty walk behind tools, edging equipment and things of that nature. So shrouding and dust collection is a big deal as far as that goes. In terms of this conversation, we're going to kind of leap over these, just other than maybe some cleanup for overfill or mortar style repairs. We're going to kind of move on past grinding, but primarily 7-inch, 5-inch polishing. Those kind of things all exist in our product line. In terms of the concrete saws and joint cleanout saws that we manufacture, I'm going to kind of glance over the broad array of these tools. They've kind of developed organically over the time period we established. And rather than just give you a boring rattle down all the lists of specs and horsepowers and all those kind of things, we make a very broad array of tools. What's on the screen right now is about 5 of our most popular tools, everything from a 5-inch style tool for crack chasing all the way up to larger gas powered equipment. Some of the more popular are the 110 volt tools, which we call the dust buggy. And that tool has really 4 versions that we've built over the last really 15 years. And the evolution and customer feedback has really pushed some of the creative juices in terms of what that tool could do. In the old days, all we needed to do is cut a concrete floor, an industrial floor. There was nothing sexy about it. Just get in there with a 7 or 8-inch blade, cut a score line, and move on. And as the renovation side of the business or the actual polish side of the business has gotten more and more focused on that aesthetic, the saws have to be more and more accurate. They have to be able to cut a very perfect joint. They have to cut out old existing material, which is more and more common that we're running into right now. And so things like very precise dust collection, actually knowing exactly where the dust comes off the blade. Our Mark III dust buggies right now are premier saw in terms of this. We actually went out, it's a very dusty job, but risked life and health and cut with blades, basically watching the angles based on the depth of cut, watching how the dust comes off the blade, and then developing capture technology to make sure we get as much dust as possible off that initial exit off of as dust exits the cut. That helps in terms of cleanliness, certainly, and with OSHA now breathing down all of our necks, that's a major deal. But it's also the efficiency too. Getting that wet, sticky material, if you've ever cut an existing joint with a urethane or a single component material, it gets really sticky and gummy. By extracting that out as quickly as possible so it doesn't gum up and swirl around for an extended period of time, helps the machine run cleaner and longer, which is a huge benefit for the contractors out there. So again, a lot of 110 volt tools. We're continuing to innovate. We had a couple new tools at the World of Concrete this year, including a propane certified large JS saw with a twin cylinder, 16 horsepower. We're actually in R&D on that thing right now, out testing it on some job sites. So far, fantastic performance. And I think the industry is going to head that direction in terms of portability. The propane powered tools are super convenient versus big 3-phase electric saws. And obviously having the safety in terms of air quality checking and those kind of things on board with the saw is a major factor moving forward. So continue to innovate with that. Couple different tools that we offer. Most of our tools are push style saws. So you get behind the thing and push it on down the line. And that's great. It gives you great sight lines on what you're cutting. In terms of random crack saws, there's a pull style saw, which is kind of a different way, but it does offer some advantages in that it's a downcut saw and you have much more visibility of the blade, whereas the push style saws are typically all upcut in direction for the blade rotation, and you now have to fully shroud that blade area. The downcut pull style saws, as our CC100 is made in this method, really gives great visibility, and for random crack chasing, that is super critical, because when you're moving the saw in a lot of weird directions, you don't have there's no reference, visual references. So in order to see the blade, this works fantastic. Whereas on straight joint cutting, on our regular push style saws, we've got intricate pointers, and those pointers and devices that allow you to line up the saw have gotten better over the years as well. And you don't have to actually see the blade as much in the cut. You can see the final result behind the back wheels typically, and ensure that you're on the joint and that you're doing a proper clean out on that joint. So a couple different variety of tools as far as that goes. OSHA Silica Compliance, that is a huge topic, has been for the last couple of years, and we've gone out and we've done testing on our products. We actually rented some warehouse space and small areas and did air sampling with dust collectors and with the saws. We've basically made sure that they all meet those requirements and that the operating instructions also are clear on what techniques need to be used, what CFM. Of course, OSHA sets the standard at 25 CFM per inch of blade. What's interesting is OSHA at first didn't recognize anything over a 7-inch blade that could have dust control on it. And so a lot of the small saws, even like our 8-inch dust buggy, which is in the photo there, didn't actually fall within an OSHA guideline. And we kind of, in a knee-jerk reaction, had to start calling them joint mills, because the mills were able to have a larger diameter cutting surface, and we were milling out physical contents, not necessarily cutting concrete, but cutting out existing epoxies and polyureas and those kind of materials out of an existing concrete joint. So we had to kind of change the way that we worded around that tool. That's been resolved. We've submitted documentation, and OSHA now recognizes these tools as a clean way to cut out these kind of joints. And so that's a big thing. It's amazing how the technology evolves. As I know a lot of people hate when the government pushes on our back, but it does innovate and forces us to be responsive. And so it's great to have a team within US Saws that could step up, get the documentation and testing done so that we could get that all submitted. And now it's a real live tool. So that's fantastic as far as that goes. Some of the dust collection options that we offer, and there's a lot of vacuums out on the market. I'm not going to discuss in depth, but everything from gas powered units to 110 volt units. The bagger units are also popular. Some great brands and great tools out there. You just have to make sure that you've properly sized the vacuum for the tool being used. And again, when we did our testing, we fell directly into those 25 per CFM per inch of blade requirements. And that's what our testing levels were. So stick to that. That's super critical. Some vacuums have features that guys like, some features guys don't like. Some are manual shakers, some are automated shakers, all those kind of things. Just know that there's a lot of options, and OSHA's really begin to accept a lot of those different type of dust collectors as long as they meet the base fundamentals. You are able to clean out a dust collection bin. It doesn't have to be a bag system all the time, but there are certain safety precautions that have to be taken in place. Wearing a mask, which over the last few weeks, everyone's wearing a mask anyway, so that's pretty easy. But if you are emptying a dust collection bin, wear a mask, protective clothing, and for that short amount of exposure to dust, even though it's not really immensely airborne, it just allows, obviously, safety first as far as that kind of stuff goes. Now, in terms of cutting out the joints, we're going to talk a little bit about operation on the saws and what we do in order to clean out joints here in just a few moments. And I've got some slides on that. But I just kind of continue to run down the line of available tools within our product kind of solution group, what we call it here at US Saws. So we do the hand grinding, the walk behind saws, the dust collection, and now joint fill machines, all as part of a package that allows a contractor to go out with one specific brand if we feel blessed if we're the brand across the board on their job site. But even still, we've been building pumps now for I think 7 or 8 years, and we've actually continued to innovate some pretty neat features. We introduced a new pump a couple of years ago, what we call the one-man pump. And this is a reconfiguration of the chassis. There is nothing wrong with the two-man design, which is pictured there, except it was cumbersome for one person to operate by themselves. It kind of required one guy to push the cart and one guy to operate the wand. In terms of the liquid control side of the machine, it's fantastic. It's very reliable. We've had tremendous success. The difficulty is always with either one of these machines, the materials that are pumped through them basically react together, and we have to be very careful about cleanup procedures and things of that nature. And that's a whole nother episode in itself right there, Kristen. So sign me up for that one. But that's an hour going through that by itself. So about 3 years ago, we repackaged the two-man design. All the liquid side is exactly the same, as it was a proven design, and we moved it over to a more compact frame that allowed one operator to shoot joints by themselves. And now there's certain things that people Some guys like the older two-man design because they do have the labor on the job site. They're on big floors, and so one guy can kind of prep the machine while the other guy is still shooting joints, whether it's refilling tanks or that kind of thing. Or on smaller projects where you just don't have the physical space for two guys to be clunking around with that thing, the one-man design actually has a nice advantage as well. So one guy can get it around the floor. In this particular case, it's shown running with a little Honda generator. So we're basically running cordless. We also have a lot of folks that use inverters and deep cycle marine batteries to operate these machines. So again, just part of the package for joint fill, clean out, kind of that whole package program. So we're going to go into some of the cutting stuff, and obviously this is where safety is super important, and we look out for, in the best way that we can, we look out for the contractors and guys that use these saws. So we size our guards, and we size based on RPM, and of course, as Kristen mentioned, I'm on the Saw Manufacturers Institute panel as a chair to make sure that we have wording and verbiage and safety documentation in place, so that as we're spinning these diamond blades at nearly 200 miles an hour of speed, we want to make sure that everything is as safe as possible. So safety stuff: have you been trained on cutting tools and blade usage? Read instructions for the saw? Been trained on inspection for the diamond blades and cutting equipment? All of this documentation is available. We have it available at US Saws or SMI, division of AEM. That information is available for them as well. Every day you should inspect the guarding on the tool. You should inspect your diamond blades for chips, cracks, and burn marks. All these things can happen really quickly. You get onto a piece of concrete that's harder than you expected. You can heat up a blade, change the temper of the segments, and actually crack and damage the core of the blade really quickly. So you do need to keep your eyes peeled for those kind of things. Verify your maximum RPMs for a particular blade or power tool. Like I said, these things are spinning 200 miles an hour. It's pretty catastrophic. There's plenty of videos on YouTube of diamond blades or abrasive blades exploding. It's pretty challenging. That guarding is there for a reason. Always keep it in place when you're operating your tool. Make sure the saw is being used in a safe manner, of course, and safety equipment for the operator: safety glasses, gloves, hearing protection in a lot of cases. Those kind of things should be worn at all times. So hopefully you guys all follow those rules and regulations. We're going to talk a little bit about diamond blade types, because this is also important in terms of what kind of material you're cutting. And there's two specific styles of diamond blades that are really out there and used in the joint clean out business right now. There's a couple outliers that are guys experiment with different things. I've had guys run wood saw blades and different things on saws. Right now they're outliers. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Just safety first as far as using that stuff. A lot of those wood saw blades are not designed for use, and if they hit concrete, they'll throw the carbide segments and things. So you have to watch out for those kind of situations. But in terms of diamond blades, there's really two primary diamond blades that are used. One is an eroding segment diamond blade. And these are used all over the place, as a matter of fact. All the large format floor grinders, everything is an eroding segment blade. And so what that means is you start with a brick or a block of material that's got diamonds randomly scattered through it. And that brick of material needs to erode away, wear away, and expose fresh new diamonds. Diamonds are very sharp and angular, so they scratch the floor, the coating, or the material away. And that's what actually does the cutting. The segment really has no sharp edges on it if you've ever run your finger across it. So those little tiny diamonds are doing all of that work. And they do wear out after a short period of time. So as that blade erodes, if you've selected your diamond tooling correctly, the blade erodes, exposes fresh new diamonds, and continues the cutting cycle until you wear the blade all the way down to the steel backer. Then the blade is totally done. Throw it away and get a new one. Anyone with a big floor grinder knows if you get on soft concrete and you've got the wrong tooling, you can burn through a few $100 of tooling really fast if you've got the wrong diamond bond selected. So anyway, so eroding segment blades. The next style is something that kind of is new and has been innovated over about the last 10 years. And those are called vacuum brazed blades. And the picture is a little hard to see, but we basically adhere diamond directly to the core of the blade. And we've experimented a lot with grinding tools in terms of for large format machines, and it really hasn't worked. Unfortunately, these have the clustering of the diamonds is so tight that there's a lot of loading and clogging, and you've only got one layer of diamonds. So once that layer of diamonds is done, there's no refreshing it again. It's gone. So it ends up being very expensive if those diamonds wear out in a hurry, especially if you get into soft concrete or abrasive surface that wear those diamonds really quickly. So in the case of large floor grinders, traditional eroding diamonds seem to be a better value. However, the vacuum brazed type diamonds are actually really, really good for cutting through plastics and materials that will become sticky during cutting. So a lot of times polyureas and those kind of materials, or different types of epoxy joint fills, this type blade will continue to cut, whereas a regular eroding segment blade will load up and clog horribly. Now, conversely, if you're cutting out damaged and spalled areas on a concrete surface, in a lot of cases, a traditional diamond blade, in fact, it's a fact, it will perform much better for almost the same reasons I discussed with the large grinding tools. A traditional eroding segment does much better through concrete surfaces for repair of spalling. It's a faster cutting tool. The longevity is better. The cost per foot is better. And so you kind of got two different tool selections that you need to be aware of as you're cutting out joints, whether there's a material in it, or if you're just cleaning out either new construction joints or construction joints that have non-sticky materials in them. The eroding segments will work really well in those situations. And just to reiterate, some different cutting applications. Diamond blades initially were designed for cutting regular construction materials, concrete and asphalt, natural stone for granite countertops or marble. That's where these really were innovated in terms of diamond tooling back in the 60s. There's some legacy that the Germans used actual real diamonds for machine tools during World War II, as their supplies were getting so low on machining tooling. They actually innovated diamond tooling for cutting metal surfaces. I don't know if that's fact or not, but there is about a 60 to 80 year legacy on diamond tooling, and polishing has obviously changed the way that we do a lot of this stuff, so that we continue to innovate the tooling for that. Now, in terms of blade selection, I just listed, when I put this list together, I just threw a few of them up there, but there are an enormous quantity of tool sizes, widths, configurations, arbor sizes, all sorts of things. I mean, if you look through there, I just kind of listed out 4, 4.5, 5 inch, 6, 7, 8, and 10 inch sizes. And those sizes continue way up to 36-inch diameter range. I mean, lots of different sizes, a lot of different bonds. If you guys are in a pickle, you're on a job site, you're not sure what to use, contact Runyon. These guys are really good at knowing what blade to select for these kind of applications. V-shaped blade for certain crack chasing applications. So rely on the experts. I mean, I think we all kind of share an industry knowledge on what works best. What are the fallbacks if something goes wrong? What's the plan B for diamond tooling? Because it can get awfully expensive if something goes wrong. So lots of different tooling out there as far as that goes. In terms of crack chasing and joint cleanout, there's two different things here. I just wanted to create a little bit of a foundation. And in terms of industrial flooring that have non-moving joints, it's okay. A lot of waterproofers freak out when they see that we're just shooting into a squared off or rectangular type joint. It is okay when it's a weight-bearing material, like a variety of folks, but Metzger McGuire or VersaFlex, there's a few guys that make weight-bearing materials. And it's okay to have a 3-sided bond in that situation. It's a non-moving joint, and really we're trying to transfer load from one slab to another across that transition. So 3-sided bonds, no problem for non-moving joints or cracks. In the case of parking structures or areas where there's a lot of thermal load, and this is typically outdoors, most indoor areas are pretty much more or less climate controlled or protected. But when you get outside and you're in a parking structure, you've got large thermal expansion and contraction during temperature change. you have to basically honor the movement of those structures. And so for a lot of crack chasing, historically, they tried to limit that to two-sided bonding. And that allows a left and right adhering side with that fill material, and allows the crack to kind of move randomly at the bottom with that natural flex and variation based on typically its temperature. But so the two-sided bond versus a three-sided bond. And so blade selection is a critical part of that as well. I threw a photo of a V-blade on there. V-blades are less popular other than for some crack chasing, but a lot of guys don't know why a V-blade's used in the first place. So this is specifically why right here is the two-sided bond. It eliminates the need for use of backer rod. If you're trying to create a two-sided bond with the illustration on the left-hand side of the screen, you would have a backer rod or a bond breaker tape along the bottom of that so that the material wouldn't adhere to the bottom of that joint. You'd just be trying to adhere to the left and right-hand sides. So, so back to some little random crack chasing, moving and non-moving, a little illustration here of kind of routing out that crack. Now, there's a variety of numbers that kind of come in terms of the depth and width and those kind of things. Most crack chase blades are actually about a 3/8 wide blade, 0.375. And the biggest reason is it's hard to get material down into that crack. If you're shooting it with a handgun or even one of the polyurea pumps, you need a wide enough joint to actually get that material down in and get a nice bond and a nice seat with. So 1/4 inch wide, yeah, some guys do 1/4 inch wide as well for random cracks and whatnot. But, and the depth will vary. Now, in a lot of cases, an engineer will specify, especially if it's a repair, how deep that needs to be repaired. There's industry standards across the board. 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch is pretty common for crack repair. And in the case of joint fill, we call a lot of the joints full depth. And it doesn't mean the full thickness of the slab. It's basically 25% of the thickness of the slab. In most cases, we're talking about a 1 inch deep cut. And in the case of a 4 inch slab, if it's a 6 inch slab, it can be 1.5 inches. Sometimes we've been as deep as 2 inches. Most of our tools have a depth capacity of about 2 inches. They're not designed to be slab saws. They're designed to basically do joint clean out and repair. And so 2 inches is plenty of depth in most instances for that kind of repair work. So another little illustration. Here's some joints that have some failure problems. The picture on the left is the world's ugliest joint. It's unbelievable how bad that was. And someone filled with a single component that had been, I think, frozen out in a pickup truck and basically jammed it into the joint. There was no way that thing stuck to anything and was a real mess to get out. Single components have a real tendency of becoming very wet and sticky the moment that you hit them with a diamond blade. So that was a lot of fun to get back out of there, but you can just see what an awful mess, what a terrible installation that was. So that all had to come out and get fixed. The pictures in the center and on the right-hand side are some separation and failure of, in one case, I think it was an epoxy material, I think on the right, and it might've been a polyurea that pulled away on the center photo. But a lot of things, a lot of variables in that in terms of getting good adhering with this material. And that's, we're kind of moving up on that side of things. So here's a traditional illustration of a control joint. About, in this particular case, it calls a width of 0.45. A lot of control joints are actually cut at a 0.125, the same width that a green saw basically comes in and cuts the slab initially. And then as we continue to overcut and apply material, especially after renovation, that joint will continue to get wider and wider and wider. The biggest reason for that is we have to take a diamond tool that will scrub the left and right hand sides of that joint and actually give us a great bonding surface for that material. The thing that's amazing is the materials that come back for joint fill. Outdoors, a lot of times there's single component materials that they stay tacky for hours and hours at a time, 24-hour cure times in some cases. And they have a consistency like peanut butter. So they're a non-sag. You fill up the joint and they just slowly settle in and work their way in. But because they stay wet for so long, they actually get great adhering to the side surfaces of that joint. In the cases of some of the fast return to service products like RS88 that Metzger makes, you're looking at cure times. I mean, you can shave those joints in a lot of cases 10 to 15 minutes, maybe a little bit more, but those materials become rigid incredibly quickly. And so you've only got a few moments for that stuff to really adhere to the left and right hand sides of that joint. And so in terms of joint fill, and this is kind of a term that's out there as well, in terms of joint fill, a little bit of separation sometimes can be normal. What you're really trying to do is fill that joint with a solid weight-bearing material, so as forklift traffic or steel wheel traffic comes across that floor, you don't get the old joint speed bump. So the other aspect is a sealer, and that's a waterproofing sealer. And those are designed to stay specifically adhered to the left and right hand sides of the joints to prevent water intrusion. If you're in an indoor space, water intrusion is not the problem. You've got a roof over the top of the facility. So that's not a big deal. What you're really trying to do is support loads with a joint filler. So it's important to recognize the difference, a filler versus a sealer. So, but you still only have a very short window of time with the fillers to actually adhere to the left and right hand side of the joints, become structurally part of that slab, and then cure out and then shave or grind or whatever the case may be to get it leveled out with the floor. So really short working time. So cleanliness of the joint is really, really important. Picking the right size diamond to make sure you get a clean cut. We were working with a contractor not so long ago. He was actually having to make two cuts, one with as I mentioned, what we call the tiger tooth blade, which is a vacuum brazed blade that I illustrated a few minutes ago. They were coming through the joint with the tiger tooth blade and then coming back and running a wider diamond blade just to clear out the left and right hand sides of the joint. So sometimes it's a combination of techniques needed to be used to really get that done and ready and prepped out, ready for a new material to be injected. So this picture, it's a little bit hard to, I mean, the color's a little off, but you can see a uniform flat fill. It's just a nice organized joint, no real tricks to it. That's a beautiful installation right there. Color's a little off, but that's some people might find that beautiful. So that's but that's a really nice install, smooth across the surface and adhered nicely to both the left and right hand sides. So joint fill is pretty simple when you talk about new construction. You're just coming in, you're cleaning out the joint, you're shooting and filling that joint with a load-bearing material and preventing damage down the road. What happens with especially older facilities, or as the materials fail out of these joints, a lot of times foreign debris, we do a lot of work with contractors that work in Lowe's and Home Depots and do the restoration in those facilities. And there's always dirt and debris, especially when you get to northern states where you get sand from where they've sanded sidewalks and stuff during the winter. A lot of that sand and dirt, they try to carpet off areas, but that dirt migrates onto the polished concrete surfaces, really does some major damage in those entranceways of the stores, especially where you've got heavy wheeled traffic. And that material, that sand and those stones and salt, breaks down existing joint fill materials. And so now you have erosion of the joint fill material, and now that steel wheeled traffic and heavy traffic starts to deteriorate, excuse me, the actual joint itself. And you start to get spalling and breaking. What that basically is concrete is chipping away on the left and right hand sides of a joint, and you run into a situation where that joint now gets wider and wider and wider, and the speed bump, or actually it's a hollow, gets worse and worse and worse. And it's just, it never gets better. It just continually degrades and gets worse and worse as time goes on. So the big problem with this is, especially in larger facilities, now we've got modern facilities like Amazon's one of those facilities that has super flat floors. They have robotic style forklifts and load carrying devices. And they've got either magnetic sensors or visual sensors on them. And if they get jostled, they lose track of where they are. They have to reset and find themselves on the track. Those systems are designed to stop the unit so that it doesn't run off and run someone over or smash into another unit or anything like that. So they stop. It's a reset period. It's their freight doesn't move as quickly as they want. So limiting vibration due to floor imperfections is a huge deal right now. It's the industry's kind of reborn again in the last 5 years with these Amazon facilities and these robotic freight carriers. So it's pretty amazing how this innovation continues to evolve. So, and material manufacturers are coming up with better and better repair materials, repair tools, and the ability to take care of slab curling, the techniques involved, and all that stuff kind of goes hand in hand. So in terms of one of my early experiences with dealing with damaged joints was everyone remembers Lego toys. They were, I grew up in Suffield, Connecticut, up in the Northeast, and Legos were imported into Enfield, Connecticut, a small town up there. And they had a multi-million square foot facility, and they had forklifts running up and down these aisles all day long. And the joints had become so badly spalled that the forklifts, as they crossed the joints, were actually breaking off chunks of their tires. And so these guys were spending $80,000 a month in forklift tires. And they developed an in-house crew. I would assume it was probably Metzger McGuire back in the early days that went in. We brought in the tool side, they brought in the liquid materials side, and they had an in-house crew that started repairing the joints all through this facility. And it was an in-house job in this particular instance, but the cost, $80,000 a month in forklift tires, that number has never left me in the 30 years or so since I walked that job as a young man. Never realized that could even happen, but it was a huge impact to my life. And here I am 30 years later, still dealing with it. So it's pretty amazing how those little things can, just kind of set a direction in your life. So, so for big facility owners, damaged concrete is a real pain in the neck. Here's a spalled out area, just kind of a rough photo. You can see the breaking away on the left and right hand sides. If there was a joint fill in this particular spall or this particular joint, it's damaged now. It's been eroded away, so it's down maybe a 1/4 inch below that surface and damaged pretty badly on both the left and right hand sides of that joint. Clearly, this would be a speed bump if you rolled a cart across it. So in terms of the tooling that we offer to help repair this stuff, and I borrowed some of this information from Metzger, there's a few different ways to cut out these joints. These guys love a fully stacked blade system on a small bear tool. It's a great little tool. And the other smaller illustration, it's actually, you can see a series of cuts have been made with a tool. With our dust buggy tools, the 110 volt tools, we run out of horsepower pretty quickly at 110 volts. So in a lot of cases, we simply make single or maybe 2 blades at max cuts, and we'll cut the full width of those spalls and then break that material out. In the cases of, with a bush hammer or something, in the cases of stacked blades, our larger saws also have a stackable capability on the flanges, so we can cut 2 inches wide and stack blades out completely. A couple of rules of thumb on this and arguments out there is, you're dealing with damaged spalled concrete. The concrete is loose and broken up, and if you mill out clean with diamond blades, you never actually break out you don't know where the micro fractures are, and that's a non-evasive way to cut. You do remove the concrete, but there's not a lot of vibration or jostling. And in the case of running a bush hammer, if there is still some loose concrete just below where you milled with diamond blades, that will actually break out those loose areas. Otherwise, you're putting down a patch. In a lot of cases, it's a thick sand and epoxy mortar mix that's troweled in, and you've got damaged concrete just below where you milled, and that does not necessarily have a bonding agent to it. It doesn't saturate down into those little voids and areas. It just fills that gap that you've chiseled out. So sometimes bush hammering actually has some advantages to breaking out and make sure you've got sound concrete all the way across that repair. Here's an illustration running a vacuum and a chipping hammer at the same time. Again, it's going to leave a very rough surface, great for bonding, and it's also going to pull out any loose material that might be below the cut line. So it's the small little inset there of chip out the high spots. Depending on the saw you're operating, sometimes you can run a saw and make 4 or 5 or 6 cuts right there. So you're only pulling out an 1/8 or a 1/4 inch of concrete, which is pretty easy to do with a bush hammer. You do want to make sure that you've got nice, clean left and right hand edges. Of course, that's the part of the beauty of repairing a spall is you want to have that come back to look totally natural, nice, square, with intent type lines. So you want to chip out to a nice saw cut and then you'll backfill that with an epoxy repair material. So kind of short and sweet in terms of the presentation. Probably going to be a few questions and answers that we have to go through, but the tools that we manufacture designed for this work specifically, whether you have large projects or small projects, there's a wide variety of features and benefits to each one of those tools and tool packages. And Kristen Vasco, if you want to open up the floor to questions, I'm ready to go.
Certainly. Thank you, Bill. That was very informative. Matter of fact, I actually gained a lot of information out of that. So thank you very much. It looks like we were ranging anywhere between 15 to 22 participants throughout the presentation, which I thought was very well. So yeah, guys, if you have some questions, I know I have a few I want to answer. I want to see what Bill would have to say about, but I'll give you guys a minute or two to kind of drop in if you have any comments or questions. It looks like Scott Metzger had a few things to say throughout the presentation. So if anybody else wants to chime in, please do so now.
I know what Scott, he's asking me if I'm a Bucks fan now instead of a Patriots fan. That's I know he's going to rattle me on that one a little bit.
Well, he mentioned he really cares about the joints when in the beginning of the presentation, when I think you had mentioned sometimes people oversee those, and a couple other comments there. I think you should be able to see it right in the chat. If you click down by the participant. So a general question for me, Bill, I would just like to know, and I get asked this all the time, and quite frankly, I have my own personal opinion on it, but I'd like to hear from your professional standpoint, what is the take on, okay, if I'm, let's say, walking into a project that's roughly, we're going to say 10,000 square feet, it's open, I do have access to 110 power. What is the advantage in what would you say is the ideal saw to use in that application? This is a polished job. We got exposed joints that need to be cut out and filled with polyurea. Would you go with the JS130 or would you go with the dust buggy, and why?
I'm going to kind of expand on that question because there's some nuances in there, and that's actually a super question. One of the barriers to entry to this business is the cost of equipment. And when you start looking at large polishing equipment and all the other things and trucks and trailers and hardware and all these things that you require to get into the industrial floor business, dollars and cents add up. And so in some cases, so if we took a package, let's just use some rough numbers here real quick, and we took 3 dust collectors and 3 dust buggies, and each one of those packages would be somewhere in the $3,000 to $4,000 range, depending on the dust collector. So you're looking at $12,000 of hardware for 3 dust buggies. In the case of the JS type saw, now certainly you're a huge performance increase. You're going from about a 2 horsepower, 110 volt tool to in the case of the propane saw that we're working on right now, 16 horsepower, huge advantage, larger blades, faster cutting production. And less labor is the other side of it. How many people do you have on your crew? If you don't have a 6-person crew, you can't run 3 dust buggies and 3 dust collectors. So that's kind of, labor is a big part of that. So a JS saw with a dust collector can easily be handled by 2 guys, and you can go out and you can cut, well, in terms of new construction, boy, you can cut a couple miles a joint a day just in terms of general clean out, if that's the case. So in a 10,000 square foot facility, well, that'd be a single phase of a project. Maybe that's even too small if you've got a high production tool like that. However, flexibility in a facility, especially when it's phase work. I mean, we've been to a lot of jobs, Walmart distribution centers, all these kind of big box distribution centers where you're only phased out a very small portion of work per day. And there's a lot of people running around. Everyone's got demand for power. And so sometimes you have to balance how easy is it to get power to that tool. Even 110 volt tools, boy, I've run 4 or 5 extension cords linked back to back to try to even get enough power to run the saw. And when you turn the saw on, it's like you almost have to kickstart the thing to get it to run. I mean, there's just no power left in the facility. So there's really some pros and cons. I mean, ideally, if a customer is serious about this kind of repair work, they really need both. The small tools will always do smaller stuff, details around racks, those kind of things. The big saw is designed for wide open running or heavy milling and removal. So horsepower is your friend in that case. And anyone that tells me that owns big polishing hardware that the bigger machine isn't the better machine is crazy. Otherwise, we'd all be out there polishing floors with hand grinders. So bigger is better based on the daily need. So it's really a kind of a trick question, but a lot of guys will go out with 110 volt tools simply because the flexibility of the tools is so good. Especially when you get into the enclosed facilities where you can't run gas or propane equipment. 110 volts easy, even if you have to run cords in from outside and have a generator outdoors. That allows you to get in there, get that work done. New construction, super easy because the joint cleanout's quite fast. But so I've kind of really taken a broad look at job site to job site. That's going to make a huge difference in variables on what you need to equip.
Well, and it's also great with the flexibility that you guys provide us as a distributor and the end user. You know, like you mentioned, you know, I mean, essentially, there's a tool for everything, and there's a way to remedy every situation differently with the product line that you're providing. So that I think that's key. I mean, the main thing is consulting with one of us, with one of you guys, and letting us kind of guide you through that. And you know, in my experience with construction and this realm of construction, you know, I can definitely agree with your answer. 2 is the best way to go, depending, you know, especially if you're going to be doing all sorts of different setups from big to small, you know. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. The other question I wanted to touch on, and I know you briefly skimmed on it as well, is, you know, a lot of times with your pumps, other pumps, and different materials that we're running through those pumps, you know, the ratio gets offset a little bit. So how we asked Scott the same question, Scott Metzger, in his presentation. He gave us one point of view. I'd like to hear your point of view and how you think what needs to happen at that point. How do you prevent that from happening? Just touch on that.
Yeah, so the polyurea pumps, they're a great tool. They're fantastic. They have a very simple design, and we use basically balanced unit, the identical style pump on the left and the right-hand side, whether it's the A or B or the B or the A. We use identical equipment. That way we know we've got the best chance of duplicating perfect results, a 1-to-1 ratio, perfectly balanced. However, you know, cleaning of these machines, and this is something I'll expand upon in a second, is super, super critical. These materials kind of, especially in the cases of the polyureas, those materials, the iso side tends to cure by itself, and exposure to oxygen and moisture really accelerate that. So you've really got to make sure to have that machine clean and make sure your lines, your pumps, your nozzles, all those things have to be cleaned out on a regular basis in order to make sure that you have no restrictions, because restrictions are what really cause a machine to go off ratio. And another example is some materials have like silica fillers in them in the case of MM80. And so one side of that material's got kind of a grit in it. And even though it's not an overnight problem, over a long course of time, it'll actually expand the wear parts or the lobes inside of those pumps, and you start to get cavitation and bypassing. So one side will be pumping material no problem, and the other one's struggling to push the same ratio of material. And the sad part is on this is you really don't know until the stuff doesn't cure. That's when it's too late. So we recommend, and we've got some great videos on how to do a startup on our polyurea pumps. It's on YouTube. Just type in USAW's polyurea pump, and there's a start and a shutdown and a cleaning video. But you need to check that ratio, and you can really check it pretty just by eye. As you pump out the left and right hand nozzle tips, you can see how much material is coming out. If you want to take a small Dixie cup or a graduated cup of some sort and actually measure the amounts, that's totally fine. I get it. That's but a lot of cases you can see pretty easily if the stream of material is balanced. And so at worst case, it's a visual check. Here's one thing we run into on a pretty regular basis too, and it's not this time of year. This time of year, the headaches seem to go away. It's in the fall, especially northern states, Kristen, up where you are, where all of a sudden it's been nice fall weather, 60s during the day, and all of a sudden you start getting some cold snaps down in the 30s, and
Right.
guys are storing materials either in an open building or in the back of a van, and all of a sudden the material gets cold. And
Right.
those materials don't, as they start to get cooler, they are not the same viscosity anymore. And now one material is more like silly putty and one is more liquid. And so those don't flow equally. This is a gravity fed system. If it won't flow into our pumps, then it's not going to come out the nozzle on a ratio also. So that's a major, major problem. And we get a rash of calls every fall. And in fact, I joke with Jim and Pat with Metzger. They pick on me. Don't call unless you've made sure that material is 70 degrees. So that's I've got the cold shoulder from those guys on those kind of questions during the months of September through November. But yeah, make sure your material is warm. Preheat your material. Make sure that it's right. There's a set of instructions on how to install and maintain material temperatures. We do offer things like tank heaters on that unit, but they're not designed to heat the material once it's in the tank. It's designed to maintain temperature if you're in a refrigerated space or a cold area. You must pre-mix and pre-warm that material. You can make tents, you can get electric blankets, you can do all sorts of things. Get that material to the right operating temperature before you pour it into the machine.
Awesome.
And then lastly, you mentioned cleanup real quick. And this is an important part of the polyurea pumps because there's so many guys that have great success with these things. We've got videos online. We wrote incredibly detailed instructions in the owner's manuals. We over and over again, we sound like a broken record. Clean your machine, clean your machine, clean your machine. There's great cleaning materials out there on the market. Metzger has M-Flush, which is fantastic for their polyurea products. Couple things: never use acetone in that machine. It breaks down the seals on the pumps. We actually use a Viton seal, an upgraded seal. One of the nice features of our machine is you can get an alternate pump from Grainger. It's a lower cost pump. We actually upgrade the seals and some components for our OEM pump. So there is a difference out there, but to get by, you can buy a pump from Grainger. That's fine, especially if you're stuck on a job site. But for the longest longevity, against xylene or the M-Flush or some of the different cleaning solvents, the Viton seals make a big difference. So we recommend our factory pumps for those because you're just dealing with kind of caustic materials all the time with that machine. Clean those things on a daily basis. There are some instances where you can leave the machine stored for a 24-hour period, but if it's anything longer than a weekend, we recommend a full clean, use the proper cleaners. 3 cleaning steps per side. So 6 total cleaning steps, flush out the material, and then solvent 1, let it run for 10 minutes, solvent flush 2, let it run for 10 minutes, solvent flush 3, let it run for 10 minutes. Then you can throw that material away and do the other side of the machine. It takes about an hour to an hour and a half to shut down the machine properly. Once that's done correctly, that machine will store forever. If you don't do it right, there's a chance that you're gonna have a problem Monday morning. So we hope that guys are doing that right. A great video to watch for that.
And the alternative, and I think we know what that is. So
spare parts, baby.
Looks like Dave Charmataro with Metzger McGuire asked a question. He wants to know. He said, let's see what he asked here. He said, what do you consider to be the life in gallons for the pump slaves using polyurea and using epoxy like MM80?
Whew, that's a really, really complicated question because we've pumped hundreds and hundreds of gallons of MM80 without a problem. It's something that you need to watch for because as that deterioration, as talking about having that filler wear out the lobes inside the pump, it takes a long, long time. Those are hardened parts. They're high quality metal parts. So it takes a very, very long time for those to wear down. However, it's something that a lot of guys don't realize is happening. So they don't realize it when you're 2% off ratio, it's probably not a big deal. It doesn't have any real effect on the material. When you get to 5% off ratio, you might start getting some soft spots in that material. When you go 10% off ratio, now you've got a problem. And so it's really not an overnight thing. It's not like, every 200 gallons of material, it's time to change the pumps out. It's about maintaining and observing the wear rate, and especially monitoring the on ratio, whether it's visually or in a graduated cup. Make sure that you're on ratio on a regular basis. We recommend it twice a day, once at startup in the morning, and then if you take a lunch break, double check it after lunchtime. Make sure that nothing's clogged up in a line, anything like that. It's a fresh startup every 6 hours or every 4 hours, depending on the job site conditions. Just make sure stuff is working properly, because there is nothing worse than shooting a couple thousand feet of joint to find out that the material is not curing. That is a nightmare for a contractor. So do your best to avoid those kind of scenarios.
Awesome. Awesome.
Let's see. Scott mentioned one big thing. It's kind of a long note. Let's just lead a quick read here. Good point. So what Scott is basically stating here is that the labeling between materials, and there's a broad variety of guys that manufacture different types of epoxies and materials. Sometimes the ratios are different. Some guys have 50-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratios. So you have to really make sure that you're looking at that very closely. We've actually had guys take and use, sorry, Scott, I'm going to mention competitors here, but take a Metzger, a pump that they've used Metzger in, and people have adhered specifically to A and B, and they take a VersaFlex and dump A and B right in the tanks. The labeling is correct, everything's right, except the ISO is labeled opposite. And they immediately cure all the material down the lines and the mixing manifold, all that stuff. Major problem. I mean, the stuff in 15 minutes, that machine is dead. It's time for a new wet end. So yeah, very, very good point. Especially the off ratio stuff, you've got to be aware. You've got to read your material, manufacturer's material. We've actually started labeling on our labels on the tanks in maybe the last year or so. We've got stickers that say ISO on them, so that you can actually recognize and highlight the ISO side on that on those tanks, because nothing makes you more mad than an $800 wet end because you put the A and the A's changed and nothing else wasn't your fault, so to speak. But yeah, it's a real life deal. Good point. Thank you, Scott.
Well, Kristen, you want to jump in and do the giveaway? And
yeah, for sure. So we have some, what was the giveaway, Vasco? The Tiger Blades?
Yeah, Tiger Tooth. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of guys out there that still haven't used, you know, they're out there struggling with wood saw blades and whatever they can get their hands on. And the Tiger Tooth blade is something, we want to make sure guys have an opportunity to get their hands on them. And so if someone wants to get their hands on a blade, we're going to give away free samples to contractors. If they want to try one, we'll get one out to them. They got to pick their size and know what they need. And we're gonna send out some free samples to folks so they can get their hands on that blade and try them out. I'm not supplying them for a whole job site, but one blade will do just to get the feel for it. And but yeah, I mean, you know, we continue to try to innovate and push the work forward. You know, we've got right now there's several jobs going on where guys have tried 5 or 6 different blades, and they've come back to the Tiger Tooth as the only blade that's getting best production without damage and spalling and some other things. There are some real meat cleaver blades out there that will damage concrete worse than it was already spalled out and damaged in the first place, trying to remove fill material. So you've got to be careful in your blade selection. And the Tiger Tooth is a great blade. It's not super aggressive. It typically won't damage the concrete. You can stack them. So you can take 2.125 blades, stack them. Now you've got a 1/4 inch blade, or you can take a 125 and an 095, and now you've got 3/16 width on those. And you just do need to alternate them about every 1,000 feet so you keep fresh edges on them. But yeah, absolutely want to make sure that guys are using the best technology for their job site. So anyone reach out to Kristen or Vasco on that, and we'll get you some blades sent right out to you.
Great.
awesome.
Perfect. That takes care of it then.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us in the webinar. Bill, thanks again for your great presentation. It was awesome. We learned a lot over here on the Runyon team, and I hope everybody that joined in the chat room, they learned something as well.
Yeah, no, really fun stuff. Thank you, guys.
From this,
Sorry?
who is the winner from the so they know to reach out to us and we reach out to them?
Yep. The winner for that giveaway is Eric Pandorf. So Eric, if you can just email me or Vasco, Kristen, Kristen.
Don't give it to him. He works for me. Get somebody else.
Okay.
All right, we'll do another pick. Go
Do the-
ahead, Kristen.
Yep.
And
Right.
really, I guys, I'm opening up to anyone on that panel. If they reach out, it's not just one blade. Anyone that's on this thing, if they want to try one of these things, they've not tried one before, let them reach out to you and get them a blade. That's the least
Let's
we
just
can
do it that way then. Anybody that emails, reaches out to Vasco or myself, we'll send you out a free blade. So
Yeah, absolutely.
just
Awesome. That's great. Thank you, Bill.
Awesome, guys. Thank you for having me on. It was a lot of fun. Nice catching up with you guys. I feel like I've had a social moment here. I've been locked in by myself for so long. So, guys, thanks for thinking of us, and keep safe.
Awesome.
You too.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye, guys.
And thanks for everybody for joining us.